In our previous videos, we have made this application in such a way that we give you a URL, it is making a GET request on that URL, and based on that, whatever data it is getting, it's parsing that data into JSON, and we are using that to change the UI of the page using DOM manipulation. So this is all well and good, but this is not very useful. Why? Because we do not have anything where we can add some data. So what we can do, we can go into our HTML file, and here we can add our input element. So we'll say input, and here we'll add a placeholder, GitHub username. We'll save it. Now we have access to this. Let's put it outside of this div, and now we have it here. We can add some basic style here by saying input. So we'll say margin bottom is 2 rem. Then we'll just add some padding to it. Done. Now what we can do, we can go into our JavaScript file, and here we will get access to the input also. So we'll say input, we'll get access to that by using input. And now what we are going to do, we are going to add an event listener on input element. So we'll say input.add event listener of type change, or you can also use input here. And whenever that happens, you have to call the function handleChange. We'll create this function right here on top of it. And what this function is going to do, this function is going to make all these things that we are doing it outside. So here we have seen the use case of all these things like onload start, onload end. We are going to remove this because we don't need it. We'll leave on error and onload. So we're going to cut this thing from here, and we're going to put it inside this function handleChange. And now inside handleChange, what we are going to do, we are going to get access to event object. And what we will do, we'll use event.keyCode to understand if the user has pressed enter or not. And enter key is 13, as we know. So whenever that happens, then what you have to do, you have to do all of these things that we were doing earlier. The only difference would be here, instead of just hard coding this username, we can change it to be coming from input.value. So we'll replace this with event.target.value. Now one more thing, here what we are doing is, inside onload, we are making it really lengthy, is so in future, whenever we are adding some new functionality here, it will get even bigger. So better way to go about it would be to why not take this thing from here, take everything that is responsible for UI, and rather than that, create another function called displayUi. And this function will get access to data, and here it is going to do something like this. And here, instead of user data, we'll just replace it with data. And now we need to call that function here. So we'll say, go ahead, call the function displayUi with user data. So here we are doing separation of concern. The only concern to this function is to display it to the UI. The job of this function handleChange is to handle whenever any change happens on input. So let's go ahead, test it. So right now it will just be displaying the dummy data that we have added earlier. What if we go ahead, add a username, press enter? What happens? If we go ahead and press enter here, nothing is happening. It is saying XHR is not defined. Okay, here we are sending it right here outside of the function. So what we will do, we'll put it inside this and save it. So now here we'll put the username and press enter. And we don't see anything happening. So first thing what we can do, we can just log the message here saying console.log event.keyCode. Now we'll paste the username and enter. It is giving us undefined. I'm very sure that input doesn't give us keycode, so we'll just say keyup instead of keycode. Refresh it, paste the username, press enter. Here we see the information of that specific username. You can change it to something else. Frank7, press enter, you get something else. Another thing that we can also do is, as soon as you press enter, we also need to delete this data. So we'll remove this console, and here, after sending this information, we are just going to say event.target.value should be equal to empty. Press enter. Here we can say Frank7, press enter, and you get the value. It is empty now. So in that way, what we did here is we made this application that we are building a bit more powerful by giving an input tag, and we made it more modular. So we have two functions, displayUi, that is only responsible for displaying the UI. Similarly, we have handleChange, and it is only responsible for reacting whenever you do keyup on element. So in that way, we learned about XHR, how to make request, and how to use that data that is coming from that request into creating any kind of UI.